And the majority of the alt-right is pretty much anti-Christian. They're moving towards the direction of the Volk neo-pagan type stuff, which is a completely controlled, manipulated movement. I'll be ready to debate any of the Volkish people on that want to debate that, just like I debated the We Was Kangs dude. So yeah, the problem, I would say there's 2 essays to read on that from our perspective, the Orthodox perspective, at Soul of the East, and they're both by Ivan Ilyin, who is a Russian Orthodox philosopher, and what he writes about on fascism and other critiques of fascism is not that it's wrong to be a supporter of your people or your kinfolk. In our view, that's the public statement and teaching of the Russian Orthodox Church, and has been for the whole idea of orthodoxy. But what Ilyin says is that the problem with fascism and the idea of the pagan imperium or the Volk is that it becomes a new idol, where you basically are just worshiping a manifestation of biology. And this is why I always point to the excellent essay by Carrie Bolton, A Rightist Critique of Biological Determinism. And no, I'm not defending everything that Carrie Bolton believes. I just think that essay is a great critique from a right perspective, that biological determinism is a dead end. And it's already been tried in history, and it's really just the flip side of the international communism. Now, granted, there are things in international communism and Bolshevism and Alinsky style stuff that is way worse. It's way more degenerate, way more. I mean, that's like they're going to be putting, vomiting on a canvas, and they're going to smear poop everywhere and call it art, and they're going to do blasphemous stuff, and they're going to promote abortion, and that's like the Bolshevik stuff. Now, and to be fair, in the ethno sphere of things, when it doesn't fall into
that's all useful for the complete demoralization of the populace.
It is, but I'm saying that some people will say, but you see, fascism doesn't have the degeneracy. Fascism promotes private property and the family and all this stuff. And my response is that modern fascism is just as much a creation of corporations and bankers as was the Bolshevik, communist, socialist stuff. And yes, the manifestation of one might be more gross than the other, but both don't work, because both are, again, idolatry, because man is not just a biological being. He's also has a soul and a spirit. And so what happens is that in those groups, what you'll have is they come to this radical position where they end up denying the humanity in the other ethnos, which is again against what Scripture teaches us. Christ tells us to make disciples of all the ethnos in Matthew 28 in the Great Commission. It's not the case that only the Anglo or the Teutonic German guy has the image of God. All human beings are made in the image of God, and so we have a duty to that. That's how Western civilization, Byzantium, that's how they actually built cultures and a big, beautiful cathedral social order type situation. It's not going to be built on worship of the self and the Volk. It's not possible, and it's already been tried, and it leads to disaster just as much as the other situations lead to disaster. So it's amazing to me that the alt-right types are just as ignorant of history, and just as ignorant of their own history and Christian history and the history of the church and Christendom as the commies and the atheists are.
Yeah. Well, they really horseshoe back towards each other.
Exactly.
Steve Charlie makes a very good but simple point, that there are kind of 2 types of nationalism. There's the one nationalism where being American is great, and they're over there saying being French is great, or being German. Hey, that's great for you. We're happy. You're happy for yourselves. Then there's the other sort of nationalism where America is great. We will conquer you all. No other form of nationalism is acceptable. So there is kind of an I'm okay, you're okay kind of nationalism that I think is kind of healthy,
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, my position is to really reject all modern forms. So I tend to prefer pre-modern forms of social order, smaller tribes, not worship of the Volk, nationhood, and monarchy. That's a whole other debate that we could talk about. And the idea of the Orthodox imperium, and really in the modern world, that was really last instantiated by Russia and the Tsar and other places like Serbia and Romania up until modern times, when democratic republicanism and its extension through Freemasonic lodges throughout the whole world basically toppled all Christian countries and monarchies and removed all confessional states except for a handful, which is just nominal on the books. But that's the problem, is that the modern world is essentially secular and atheistic. And, you know, that's really just fundamentally contrary to the entire approach that I have. I mean, now granted, that's kind of, I don't want to be a LARPer or be this idealist either. Understand that that's not the modern world. We're in the modern world. We have to deal with that. And I see the modern world basically more like the first 300 or 400 years of the church, where it has to be re-Christianized, right? It's going back towards this secular, pagan, occult, atheist approach to the social order. It's going to have to be re-Christianized. So unfortunately, what we're going to get is brutality. You want to throw out God, you want to throw out the ideas of morals and human dignity, you're going to get brutality. There's going to be, you're going to get a brutal state, a global brutal state, and it's not going to be what you think it's going to be. And all these atheists and these clowns are going to find out what usually happens when those kinds of power structures come to be, is they get rid of their minions. Their minions are not respected. Their minions are seen to be the willing dupes that they are.
Yes.
So and why
you're just lined up against the wall? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, definitely, you see these disturbing currents. You see them on the left, like you might have, like even the left is using terms like whiteness. Like, just like within the last year, I started hearing people talk about whiteness, which is like an essential white characteristic. I hear people use other terms. I forgot something else, but yes. I mean, you hear this kind of tribalism, where it's almost like there can be no rational discourse between tribes, because white people have white thoughts and black people have black thoughts and Jewish people have Jewish thoughts. And this seems to be the direction that both the extreme left and the extreme right are going, where you just have these tribes, which is not really very appealing to me, because I like ideas. I don't like the idea that there are no ideas that can be communicated. There's just a biologically determined mindset, and that we just have to war, might makes right. So I think Christianity is the only salve for that.
I think so too, absolutely. I mean, in our view, man is not just one-dimensional. Man is not just a biological bubbling forth. He's not just a member of the collective. There are many facets and dimensions to what it is to be man. So actually, Orthodoxy has a very unique anthropology. So in our view, there is a tribal component. There is a component to man that is his ethnos, the traditional, consistent term that's used both in the Old Testament and the New Testament for a people group. Race is a little bit fuzzy, because it's kind of a modern post-Darwinian classification, but I'm not completely opposed to what most people mean. They just mean a classification of a bunch of tribes out of Caucasus or whatever, like white people. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about that. Obviously, that does exist. And yes, you can, when you say black people and then you get more specific and you talk about different areas of Africa, sure. Those are just broader categories of big groups of people. So in our view, those things aren't necessarily bad. For example, our iconography, we always retain people's ethnicity, like Saint Moses the Black, who's a famous Orthodox saint. He's always pictured as a black dude. He's never going to be pictured as a white dude. This is why, in our view, we don't believe in like the Catholic practice of making Jesus into Asian Jesus or making Jesus into black dude Jesus, because it's very important that Jesus be the Jesus who was born from the line of Abraham and the line of David and born of Mary, right? Who wasn't Asian. Mary wasn't from Hong Kong, right? So Jesus has to retain his historical identity, because that's a very important part of maintaining his human nature, is that we believe he really did come into time, space, and history in a human nature. And so we can never alter people's ethnicity or come up with, but we also, again, we don't take ethnicity, which is just one component of man, and put that up into like the strata of the most important and godlike idolatrous thing that we're going to worship, and as if that's going to create the utopia, the Reich that's going to save us. No, it's not. It's just an idol. And Ivan Ilyin in his essays, I think, shows that beautifully. So for us, that is a component of man. It's fine to talk about man having that component and having that heritage and that tradition. The Orthodox Church, by the very fact of its liturgies, which is in different regions, vernacular native languages, that shows that we believe in the preservation of people groups and their cultures. Otherwise, we would just say everybody has to have like one kind of liturgy, and it has to be all done in the exact same way. No, there's a bunch of different types of liturgies that are set up, and different cultures have had different traditions. Nothing wrong with that, as long as they're in union with the moral law of God. Yeah. So in our view, I mean, to me, this all makes perfect sense, and it actually avoids the extremes of, on the one hand, like the left, who says you can't have any heritage or tradition, and gender and all that has to go away. We got to destroy all that, because the only way that we're going to have the globalist social justice utopia is when we destroy everybody's distinctions. That is so lunatic. That's Babel. That's Tower of Babel, like total Satanism, basically. And then on the other hand, you have like the extreme of the right that thinks that biological determinism and IQ is going to I have the highest IQ of all white people, and if I have the highest IQ of all white people, I can create a white utopia, and we will all fly to the moon in a giant white chariot, and we will erect a white space station of only white children. I mean, come on, but that's literally what some people think.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly the liberal atheist materialist is going to have to wrestle with that. If there is no basis for human value or human worth or human rights, how are we not to say that the person with the better IQ isn't deserving of more rights or isn't more valuable as a human being?
Well, most atheists treat them as if they're more evolved, as if that means anything, by the way.
Yeah. So I mean the internal contradictions are right, and honestly,
I was just watching this black guy who's an atheist and emperor atheist. And
I saw that. Yeah,
somebody was sending him like my stuff and mentioning him and